Welcome to another episode of the Curious Midlife podcast. And I'm so happy to have Julie Thom with me today. And I discovered Julie on Instagram. And for all the pros and cons of social media, I've just discovered so many cool people doing so many cool things that are dear to my heart. So it's hard to describe what Julie does because she does many, many things, and she will describe those momentarily. But a kind of light, brief title would be a trauma-informed movement and life coach. But you do many things and have many hats. And before we started recording, you were just saying how clients find it hard to tell other people what they do with you. So welcome, Julie. What do you do?
What do I do? That's a great question. In simple terms, I help people repair and heal their nervous system using trauma-informed movement. So it's really, it's been an evolution. I started as a personal trainer, but I also was, I'll say, sick in quotations for a long time. In my 20s, my body essentially fell apart. I was an athlete my whole life. And basically, I was at the gym. I went and did a landmine squat. My back went pop. And then I went and saw like every specialist you can imagine. I saw everybody under the sun. And I wasn't really getting, I was getting better. I get better for a little bit and then I didn't. So I was just more in this like learning game for like the last, whatever, 27 years. I've been really learning all these different modalities and uh and just trying to piece them all together on how to make my body feel better from the inside out. So that's why I wear many hats, because I've learned so much from many people from many different um modalities, like I said. Like, so it's like I've worked with I've worked in physio clinics and I worked with acupuncture, and I love Eastern medicine, but I've done, obviously been exposed to Western medicine because I grew up in Canada and then US. So being exposed to that. So it's really being open and being curious as to how I can help people feel better in their bodies at the end of the day.
And as you're saying, it's really interesting that there's no real clear title
No.
for this kind of multidisciplinary approach. Yet, I think it's safe to say there is a general acceptance now of, I mean, for me, it's like, are we in the dark ages or can everyone just agree mind body? Like,
Sure.
like
Yeah.
how many decades and centuries does that have to still be a discussion?
Right. Yeah.
Um, but so how do you talk to people about, like, where does that conversation start? If someone's coming to you, or like people have knee pain, people have back pain, people will say like, oh, I'm over 50, I'm in menopause, like I just feel really stiff.
Mhm.
And then there's the physical body, but then you talk about also the emotional body and
Yeah.
feeling safe in the body. So where does that all begin?
That's a great question. It depends on the person. So what I do is really just ask. I'm really good at just asking questions and I listen. So it's about helping. I really focus on meeting someone where they're at. So, and that's like it took me a while to get there because I know a lot about a lot of different things, but I'm not a master of anything. I know a lot of different things, and so I just listen. And so it's about helping that person. My job is really to help that person feel safe first and foremost. So that's why when people are like, can I work with you? I'm like, well, at the end of the day, does your nervous system feel safe with me? And if it doesn't, then I'm not the right person for you. Because I've seen so many people, and even myself, I worked with so many different practitioners and doctors and whatnot, but safety was not established out of the gate. So right there, my nervous system wasn't primed to heal to the best of its ability because safety wasn't addressed. So my job is really to establish safety with the person and figure out where do they want to start. And then we can go from there. So if they want to start, you know, like you said, mind body. So, like 300 years ago, some white guy said, the mind controls it all. It's all about the mind. And we're going to think our way to healing and all this stuff. And, we now know the body has very, very powerful ability to heal. And so they intersect and they're connected. They're not separate entities. And we understand this now. So, that top down approach of, let's neocortex, let's think is fine. Let's think our way out of this problem it's not working. And so most of those people that come see me have been working with therapists, have been with a physio or seeing a chiro or working with an osteo for a while. And it's just, there's a missing piece. And that's where they're like, I think you're the missing piece. And I'm like, maybe I am. Let's find out. And so it's that curiosity as to, okay, what are the pieces that might be missing? Because I look at the body as a whole. And so I'm looking at the emotional, the mental, the physical, the spiritual. There's one more, whatever I missed. The big one. So essentially, I'm looking at all those pieces. So whichever one they want to work on, we're going to start there because it's about your safety. It's about your comfort because you start with what you know. And then we go from there because I'm not going to ask you. It's not like asking somebody to go to the gym and you're like, okay, we're going to lift 100 pounds today. And you're like, what? I can't do that. And then you scare them and then they shut down. Like, that's not something for me. So that's why I love your whole concept of movement snacks. Love it. That's what it's all about, right? Because when we can make the nervous system feel safe in these it's the little tiny things that we can do every day to help influence our nervous system. That's where the big changes really occur. It's not just one big shift. It's like, okay, like I have I'm like in menopause and my body's failing me and what's going on? And you're like, you're in this fight. It's like you're pushing the rock uphill. And I'm like, well, your body's actually just protecting you. What's happening? So again, many people come at it from a top-down approach, where I come at it from a bottom-up approach. So it's like, what's the body trying to tell us right now? Well, menopause is, oh my gosh, that's a whole entity in itself energetically, because when you hit menopause, if you think about evolutionary wise, you're no use to society. Like you don't all humans are here to do are basically survive and procreate. That's it. That's all our job is, right? And when you hit menopause, you can't procreate anymore. So what use are you to the rest of the world, right? But that's where finding your purpose and finding that higher power and connecting you to, your emotional purpose. That's where it changes your life. And I find a lot of women and men, when you hit the andropause for some men, when they hit that stage, they don't know what their purpose is. So that's why their body's like, yo, you don't know? I don't know. So let's just create chaos. And this is where, the body's just trying to navigate the chaos at this new stage. That's what I like in my experience.
I mean, I agree with everything and beautifully put. I'm just like, yes. Let's have more people talking about this. Let's have this should be in like every movement coach's thing. So so two things. So this idea of safety and the nervous system, I discovered it kind of through my own route of concussion and perimenopause and divorce and like life just going boom. And being lucky enough to be around coaches who are really well versed in that. And also coming from parkour, which has this very emotional component to movement, about fear and connection to the environment and your own body and emotional autonomy. But a lot of people, I don't think, have this connection between really knowing what it feels safe.
Right.
Like so how do you begin those conversations about safety when it's like, for most people, it's like, well, safety is like how to cross the road. I'm not going to be hit by a car. Safety is I'm not being followed by a mysterious person in the car park at night. So what is this thing of safety and how does that manifest itself in somebody who's just having like a pretty quiet life? Like I talk to women and they'll, I'll say to them, like, I think you're like systemically in chronic stress. And they're like, I'm not really stressed right now. Like I don't have a big workload. I don't have but they have symptoms of poor sleep, there's a stiff body, anxiety and weight gain and da 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 da. So how do you begin and what are your thoughts about this everyday safety that is a different way of feeling and being safe as opposed to a very external threat to my physical being?
Right. So how do we move from top down to bottom up, basically?
Yeah.
How do we move the brain? Well, it's understanding the bottom up approach. So understanding the nervous systems. We have two branches. We have the central and then we have the peripheral. The peripheral is where I'm at. And so when you understand polyvagal theory, right? So in 1994, Stephen Porges created this whole concept of, the evolutionary process of getting us to, we are social beings. We want this ventral, this green state. And this is what we're all trying to achieve at the end of the day. And the fact that it was only discovered in 1994 is like, what? Like,
We're really catching up.
we're really behind the ball. Like, it's still really, really young, right? So where I start, the conversation starts is really befriending your autonomic nervous system. What are the automatic processes? So your senses really is where I start. So safety is all about sensory. So what I do is we start with, like, I teach my masterclass. Like last night, I taught all about the lymph, and it was fantastic.
Oh, we have to go there. We have to go. That's the next question. Yep.
Lymph is amazing. Like I used to teach it with lymph and fascia, because fascia's really was the door that opened for me to how I ended up down this road. Because I used to be that person. I'd be like foam rolling, and I saw your interview with Jill Miller, and it's amazing. Like I'm extremely passionate about fascia, because fascia tells us so much about the body. But it's also connected to the lymph, and the lymph is connected to the nervous system. So when you read like Candace Pert's Molecule of Emotion, you understand there's like these neurotransmitters and how the body communicates, and it's all connected, right? But everybody teaches it so separate. And I'm like, but it's not separate. So how can we start? How do we, where do we start? We start with the autonomic nervous system. So it's all about senses. So in my masterclass, I start with music, because I don't have a smell-o-vision. Smell is where I would start, but I don't have a smell-o-vision. And if I'm going to teach this to the masses, I don't have access to, like, okay, smell this and tell me what you think. Right? So
like, get your tea, make the most potent thing, and go.
Right. And just start smelling it. So it's more like we get into that, but I use vision. I use what I have access to. So I use sound first, because sound and smell are two of the most quicker ways to influence the mammalian or the limbic part of the brain. So when we do that, that's where our memories are stored and whatnot. And so that's where I start, is I use your sensory. So we figure out what your sensory hierarchy is. So a lot of times, like, okay, what kind of music? Because we all know when we hear a song, something happens. It's like, like you start moving your body, and like that's the somatic world is so beautiful, because you just play the music and there's no right or wrong movement. I love that. Like I used to be that person that you're like, no, there's a right or wrong way to move. Now I'm like, no. However you want to express it, let it go. But your fascia might be restricted, or your lymph might be blocked, or we might have some stickiness in the diaphragm. So let's look at that as well to help us express ourselves fully, right? But where do we open the door? It's with your senses. And I start with music. But if you have access to smells, or if you're an essential oil person, it's extremely, extremely powerful. And the body will tell you, you do the smell test. Like, I tell people all about it. So we did it last night. And people are always floored, like I had one of the members, she's like, I did the smell test. I had all my essential oils lined up, and you wouldn't believe, some of them were good, some of them were bad. And she's like, I had no idea. I was just using them just because, somebody said it was good, and I put it on my body, but her body was saying no, but she didn't know that. So when you learn how to assess it, so that's why I'm like, assess, don't guess. So then that way we can really tune into what's our body trying to tell us. So like I said, in my masterclass, I take you through a whole genre of music. So like the funny part is like, I had no idea like country music. I always thought I hated it, because it was always like about, getting run over, my dog getting run over.
It's so tragic.
Right? It's always like,
it's like music for cats to die to or something. It's like,
yeah, like it's always sad. But then I'm like, no, when you actually listen to it, my body moves in a different way. And when you tune in to understanding like the different nervous system states, you're like, oh, that does make me feel a little bit green. I am a little bit ventral when I listen to country. I had no idea. And then I like funk, apparently. So I was like, I play that stuff. And consciously in my neocortex, I already have these preconceived notions. But when I drop into the body, my body tells me something else. So I'm like, oh, okay. Now we use this information. So we use hertz as well. So I do like the healing hertz and whatnot. So we really start there. And then I do eyes. So I do a whole bunch of pictures. So I'll do very similar pictures. And then I'm like, all I want you to do is just look at it and notice. So I'll go back and forth, picture one, picture two, and notice what happens in your body. What are the sensations that you start feeling? Do you feel the tingliness? Do you feel your stomach drop? Do you feel your tense? in the jaw, your face, your hands, all that kind of stuff. So it's really just using senses. And once we have that information, then we can start creating that neural hierarchy for you, and understanding that when you feel dysregulated, when you've been triggered, you can then go to your neural hierarchy. So I had like a client in my masterclass who basically was describing, like, every time she gets triggered, like, I'm like, what do you do? Like, what are your coping mechanisms? Like, like something happened and she does not feeling safe in her body. And, what do you typically do? And long story short is that she really likes pressure. So pressure is really, it releases dopamine and it makes us feel safe. So with her, and she's like, oh my gosh, like, yeah, I love it when I put a weighted blanket or my husband hugs me really hard. So we figured out ways for her to include pressure through her day, to just do a check whenever she's feeling off or dysregulated or unsafe, or whatever word you want to use, right? So it's just when you understand, like, I really love heat. Like, I love heat. So it's like, it's hard for me when in the winter, because I don't get exposed to a lot of heat. But now that I understand how, like, I bought a sauna. So you do things to start befriending your nervous system. And when you understand why you like that, or you might already know why you like something, but sometimes you don't, like, so like I get a lot of times on my posts, like, people, I do that instinctively. That's great. You have great intuition, but you didn't know why. Well, it's your nervous system saying, this is what makes you feel safe in this moment. Right. So long answer is,
No, these are amazing. I want to join the masterclass. This is amazing.
Yeah, so it's really, well, it's fun. For me, it's fun. Like, a lot of people are like, why do you, like, it's a lot of, like, it's like 7 hours. Well, actually last night was like a 2.5 hour class. So you're supposed to be an hour and a half, but I leave it open. I open it up for people to ask questions, because it's really, for me, I'm extremely passionate about helping people feel safer in their body, because I didn't feel safe in mine for so long. And I didn't know how, because I didn't trust people. Like, my big issue is vulnerability, and trust is really hard for me based on what's happened to me in my life. Like, I didn't know I actually had trauma occur to me. I'm really good at disassociating. And I didn't know that all of my learning, like the fact that I love to learn, is a trauma response. I didn't know that. So that's where it's like, now that I know, it's like, oh, okay, that's why I do what I do. So now that I can answer these questions, that, that neocortex or front brain, it's like, now my body can respond in a way, because we've connected the pieces, and we connected dots. So essentially, I help people connect the dots. That's another thing you can say.
This is amazing. And I mean, for me personally, that brings up it. Well, it just immediately reminded me of when I was in this chapter of concussion and perimenopause, and not really understanding, like, what is this thing? Like, why do I wake up and cry? And I would like pour bergamot oil everywhere. My car, I would have little things of oil in the car, and I would just like douse the seats and the floor. And because driving was very challenging for me at the time. Just like, I think, but basically, if my dog didn't run out of food, I wouldn't have gone to the supermarket. So like, taking care of him made me take care of me at that time. It was just, there was just an overwhelm where all I wanted to do was just lie on the sofa and cry or sleep. And I would even, like, my housemate at the time would joke that we would watch TV shows or films, and any action sequence, I was like a sleeping goat. I just go like, whoo. My system would just shut down. It was just like, too much. Like, any action sequence, too much. So like, driving a car on the, at 60 or 70 miles an hour, I needed bergamot oil.
Yeah.
Never connected those. I was just like, oh, it's just, it's a really nice smell. It's kind of like Earl Grey tea. Yeah, it's really nice.
But see what it did? It went into your mammalian brain. So essentially, that's where your safety mechanism was, right? Because that's when you're healing from concussion, like, that's a whole nother layer.
Oh, it's funky.
You really have to go to basics, though. Really go back to basics. But it's all sensory. If you really think about it, it's all sensory based. And when you understand, like, what you're looking at is so important. And like, the direction you're looking is so important to your healing. So, because like, you see something violent, shut down, right?
Yeah.
That's why it's training. And then knowing that one eye might be stronger than the other, and getting more input, and you have all this imbalance. So your brain's just trying to, like, yo, it's overstimulated.
Excuse me.
Yeah. So what can we do to calm it down? And it's all sensory based. So it might be pressure, it might be heat, it might be looking at certain pictures, and the distance, how far it needs to be or how close, all these like, visual is a big, big piece of the puzzle. And that's why
Hmm.
like Z Health does a wonderful job of doing that. The only thing that I found with Z Health is that it's not all for athletes, but it's very much,
Performance
primary
based.
based. So I'm like, okay, what can I do with this information and apply it to the everyday person? So I tell all of
Yeah.
my clients, I'm like, eye drills are non-negotiable. If you want to survive in this world and you want your body to move optimally, you have to do eye drills. But the
Hmm.
question is which ones,
Hmm.
when, and how do I help them? Because it's like, so many people are on a screen or whatever, and we don't have, this, most people don't take past traumas. I'll call it trauma, but
Hmm.
past dysregulation, we really don't, take that into account. So that's where like I know now, like part of my trauma, I have an imbalance in my brain. So that's why like crawling is so wonderful, and bird dogs and dead bugs are so good for the brain body wise. But where I'm looking when I'm doing them matters. And people don't realize that because they don't understand the neural hierarchy. But when you do, and it's like,
It's
oh,
like,
it's a new game.
so I have this thing where, and I mean, I love it. I just want to like tap your brain and talk to you for 10 hours. Um, so one story during that concussive period, I remember I was like, okay, I want to go and lift heavy. I mean, I was
Mhm.
in incredible shape at the time I had the car accident. And I remember thinking like, okay, I'll go and lift. And I remember there was one day I went to the gym and I set up the barbell and I was just like, no,
Mm.
no, there was loud music. And I
Mm.
went to this place in San Diego. It's just opposite Fiesta Island. There was this old calisthenics park there. And like I'm a nature person. Outside environment places make me happy. And I just took my shoes off and I just went and balanced on the railing and I just looked at the water and I looked at the grass. And I only went and like lifted like one day a week. And it was like, so every day, every morning, every evening was like, okay, I don't just need nature right now. I need big nature. I need long vistas.
Yes.
And unless I start my day barefoot outside on the ground, it's a funky day. And I felt it so powerfully. It wasn't like, oh, hey, this is some woo woo shit. This was like, no, like my emotional state is either like I can manage things and I can begin to function or not. Like this brain injury is really speaking very loudly. It's a non-negotiable. And so that was really interesting. But one thing I'm I, I repeat so much when I'm training people online, I'm always like, open your eyes, open your eyes. Because whilst there is this huge value of interoception,
Mhm.
and people like it's wonderful you're lying on the floor and you're breathing and you're feeling and hearing inside. I'm always like, well, I want you to train to be as relaxed when your eyes are open because you spend most of your day with your eyes open. And where your eyes are, the head goes, and where the head goes, the body goes, and how you breathe and how you regulate. And it's interesting, like some of my parkour coaches, and these are like some of the group of friends who, were just this maverick group of instinctual misfits who were interesting children of first generation immigrants who had a lot of trauma,
Mm.
huge amounts of trauma. Like we're talking like, child soldier parents. We're talking walking across deserts. We're talking like, the capital T kind of stuff.
Right.
And they became the capital M kind of movers as strategies.
Right.
And they would shout like, open your eyes,
Mhm.
open your eyes. And they never had coaches. This was what's I found really interesting about this group of people who kind of they've changed the bar. They've lifted the bar of what we now know is humanly possible for someone to do, to achieve, and to
Right.
not break in the process, and do it in this way that they never had a coach. No
Right.
one told them. No, they were never in the books. They were, and yet they've achieved all these things. And so many of the things are like what was instinctual to them. You can now go back and look at and go, yeah, well, yeah, they do all of that. They do all of that. And I know in the Z Health offices in in Texas, they have a whole bunch of photos of parkour athletes.
Oh, really?
Yeah, as a kind of inspirational, movement performance kind of thing. Like Eric Cobb has my book. So I know that they know about like this story of all that. So um the thinking brain.
Mhm.
You have a PhD, I have a PhD. We like learning. You did
Yeah.
philosophy of sport.
Yes.
What's that all about? What
Uh,
came out of that and how does that fit in? Or where do you see what you would love to see incorporated in that?
Mm. Well, the philosophy of sport so my master's was in psychology of sport. So
Oh,
where
even
it's
better.
very like black and white. It's either this or it's either that. And
Okay.
so it was like there was always an answer. It was like this or that. Where philosophy of sport is like it's 50 shades of purple. It's like there's
It's
it could
nebulous.
all there's always it's like everything's relative. That's the answer. Everything's just relative, depending. So when I
Everything
was
depends relative. Yeah.
it just depends. So, it's everything's relative. So, like when I was doing my doctorate, it was during Lance Armstrong's reign with
Okay.
doping. So I was working with doping in sport. So that was the focus. And it was learning, like I was working for the Canadian anti-doping agency and whatnot. So I was really into that work, but I wasn't passionate about it. And so what I was learning at the time, like this is actually during my doctor's when I had my nervous breakdown. So my body basically was failing me because I kept pushing and pushing, but I wasn't loving my work. I wasn't like the reason I got into it, I was a swimmer. And so when I swam for Pac-10 or it's Pac-12 now. Pac-10 back then. It's like how old I'm aging
What
myself.
is Pac-10? Just I have a lot of people in Europe.
Pac-10 are the universities,
Okay.
the colleges, I guess, in the
Mm-hmm.
States, the colleges that are on the West Coast. So it was like Oregon, Washington, California. Um, I think Arizona is a part of it.
This is
Yeah,
kind of it's elite level across a
elite
large
level, yeah,
population base.
NCAA,
Yeah.
yes, NCAA Division One. So I was swimming against, top level athletes. Anyway, at the time, I was swimming against some Chinese swimmers who'd been banned from China from doping, but they were able to compete in the US. And, so I was swimming against them. So I was fascinated because it was just like, I remember
How does that
walking.
feel?
Well, it doesn't feel like the bar, it's not even, right? So
Mm-hmm.
you're competing against people that like Pandora's box has been open. And that's really what I was fascinated because in the world of sport, it's a whole different world. It's kind of like academia. It's a whole like when you do your doctorate, people speak different when you're in academia versus in
Yeah.
everyday life. Like
Yeah. Yeah. And
and
I'm not in academia. Like I dipped my toe, did the thing, and I'm like, I'm a
that's it.
filmmaker and I like jumping around outside.
Right on. So that's it. Because the whole thing is like you stay in it, you gotta, like
Add
publish a
alities
book.
on the end of every word. The ality of the
Yes.
ality and the ality of this and da 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 and let me be published and only 12 people will read it and let's have these huge outcomes out of it. Well, they don't come out of it because only 12 people have read it.
Exactly. So it's a different world, right? So I was starting to distance. So when I was doing it, I was losing my passion and I wasn't really enjoying myself and my body was starting to fail me. And this is where the stress bucket really got full. And so like I'd wake up with like pus coming out of my eyes and I'd have to like crawl to the bathroom to put a warm cloth on my eyes just to clear it. So it was pretty bad. And like my joints hurt. I had eczema everywhere. So it like led to chronic fatigue. And I mean, I was, in my 20s. So, I
And an
shouldn't be
athlete.
an athlete. At that time, I was actually doing triathlons. So I was competing in triathlons and
So no
training.
stress.
No stress at all. No stress at all.
No
So
high
it was
achiever pushing anything there
no,
going on.
not at
No.
all.
Super
Not at
chill.
all. Right. So it was, yeah, to the extreme. And so, what did I learn from that is really that there's different ways to think, that it's not just, doesn't have to be just this way. And so, like, I always felt, to be honest, I always felt I was the fish swimming the opposite direction to everybody else. Cause I'm like, I don't fit in here. Like my brain, like I look at different options, kind of like parkour. Like you have to make split decisions but you have to like look at the landscape. You have to look at your terrain and make quick decisions, but you do it based on like intuition and whatnot. Whereas philosophy, I found offered that. It's just like I had different options. Like my favorite part about the whole thing is I was teaching a biomedical ethics course, and I loved it because it was like there was always, you know, like I remember one discussion, it got really heated because it's like with a whole breast cancer gene, find out, do you cut off your breast, do you
Mm-hmm.
not? And it was interesting to hear different arguments, and you had to come at it from a philosophy
Oh,
philosophy perspective. So you
yeah.
had to, you know, I had to have that
Interesting.
argument. Yeah. So it was a fabulous class. And then I'd bring in like real life TV shows about scenarios and the ethics of it all. And it was just, I loved it because it would create conversation. And
Hmm.
that's for me, that curiosity is really the foundation. Like I realized now that I know what my purpose is in life, it's all about creating curiosity in the body and in the mind. And that, and like, if I can create that in you, I've done my
Hmm.
job. I've done my job. If you're curious about how I can, just live and optimize my body in a way that's fulfilling and purposeful, I've done. That's my legacy, I think, in this life
It's
now.
beautiful, and I think the more for me, there's a curiosity and creativity are great bedfellows. It all leads to self knowledge,
Exactly.
and
Exactly.
then it's like you can't. It's really tricky, or maybe you get lucky every now and again to change something you're not aware of.
Mhm. Absolutely. And that's what happened to me during the pandemic. That's where the pandemic totally put me on a different trajectory because, I kept learning about the body, but that's when I really uh I kind of shifted gears to trauma, and like trauma became very trendy, kind of is, big T, little T. It's very, a lot of people recognize that, we all, if everybody has, it's not necessarily big T, little t, but just we all have some type of trauma or dysregulation, whatever language, works for you, and, you know, like sits with your nervous system is fine. But I was just curious. I'm like, I'm going to see where this takes me. And that curiosity opened a completely new door that I had no idea existed. And now it's like, I love, like, it's so much fun. And I'm like, this
Hmm.
is what it's like to be ventral. This is what it's like to be green. And I'm like, okay. Cause I was pretty content, and, I have all this education, but it's like, it's not really, it's helpful, but it doesn't really, it's, again, it's like, I have all these different, I understand somatics, and I understand acupuncture, and I understand, like, that's the holistic healing. And my dad is a naturopath, now switched to biological medicine, and he's teaching. He just created, or just didn't create, he just finished his book called Begin Again, and it's called the brain, and he has a brain protocol on how to rewire and completely reset your nervous system from epigenetics, like all the trauma from epigenetics to now whatever we can reset and rewire your nervous system, from a energetic and physiological perspective. So when people talk about the root cause, we don't even have to know the root cause. We can do this protocol and we can reset you completely and just like get rid of chronic pain, which is really, really cool.
Beautiful,
Yeah, it's
powerful,
amazing.
and
Very powerful.
necessary and needed, and
Absolutely.
in high demand.
Absolutely. And that's the thing. So he's teaching it to naturopaths, but I'm like, I took a seminar and I'm like, yeah. So the thing is, when people go see a naturopath, they're not going to see them for trauma. Like some people don't even recognize they have trauma. Like I didn't, but I just kind of like, happened upon it because I was really good at disassociating. I was really good at like keeping that beach ball underwater and not feeling. So if you're someone, when you talk about somebody that I don't know how to be, what my body's trying to tell me, well, that's a sign right there that you're
It's work to
disassociating.
do.
You got some work to do because you're really good at, your women that you're talking about, like, I have a chill life, I'm good. Those are people that are disassociating and not really connecting to their body. So all that they're doing is just pushing that beach ball down hard, and that's exhausting. So, and but they're so used to pushing that beach ball down. That's their norm, and that's their survival state. So helping people recognize that, there are other options and there's hope. Like that's what I'm like, I love that. Like when people finish talking to me, they're like, I have hope. I'm like, yeah, you do. Because I
Yeah.
felt hopeless for the longest time. I really did. I felt like, oh, I'm just going to have pain for the rest of my life. And now I'm in my late 40s and I'm virtually pain free. And it's like, oh my God, I can't imagine. Like, I
Yeah.
couldn't, if you would have told me 10 years ago, I'd be pain free. I'd be like laughing in your face. And if you would have told me a year ago, I'd be talking to you about emotions, I would have laughed. Because I'm like, I'm not someone, I'm not emotional. Like I'm not an emotional person. But the fact that I talk about it, it's like, you know, how you're supposed to teach what you need. And that's essentially that's the path I'm on right now. And it's fun. I'm curious. I'm like, what's showing up in my body today? Like when people come to my studio and my gym, first thing they see on the wall is what's showing up in your body in this moment. And they're like, it makes people pause, right? And I like that. And that's where the philosophy part, uh, like I like asking questions and like
Mm-hmm.
like having you ponder, like, I don't know. Let's ruminate on this for a minute and go from there.
Mm-hmm. And I love the just, having fun.
Mm,
I'm really like I think everyone needs to have like a few fun coaches in their life. That like people who like their label is fun coach,
mhm.
and to just have fun with things. Like, we're both serious, highly educated women.
Sure.
And for me, I value fun very, very highly in my life. Like
Mm,
this has a high priority of having a really quality life, having a quality to my life. And also this thing of, people living with pain, whether it's, like, my knee pain or this kind of everyday chronic, like, oh, I'm always a bit stiff and I'm always lacking this. And I'm just like, that's not acceptable. Don't settle for that. Like, that's not acceptable.
agreed.
And like I'm 53 and I wake up pain free, and I'm not special in anything, and like, yes, you can build muscle and you can do that and you can do this and that, but and I really think like finding joy in
Mm,
movement and having different stories,
mhm.
like knowing the stories you have, but then like, oh, what if we write a new one? what if
Right.
what if you're wrong about that? Like, what if, there was a lady this week who I was talking to on one of my challenges, and we are doing some breath work kind of stuff, and I said to her, like, oh, you recover really well. And she was like, oh no, but I've always thought I'm a terrible sleeper. And I was like, well, what if you're not? Like, the way just what if you're not? What if you're wrong about that?
Flip
What
the
if that
switch.
story is just like,
Mhm.
what if you actually dream you're awake, but you're actually sleeping? Like, all your breathwork numbers to me tell me like you recover really, really well.
Right.
And she was like that was a whole new story to think about.
Mhm.
And so it's interesting. So I think I first saw you during the pandemic. I think, we were all online a lot more.
Yes.
and and I was like, oh, there's this other woman who's outside and she's barefoot and she's just jumping up and down and shaking and she's doing all these crawling moves that I like. Like, this is so cool.
Yeah.
So give us an insight. Like, what is happening in Julie's world right now? Like, what are your everyday things that you
My every
share and do? What are your
uh
non-negotiables, or even if
so
there are such things?
there absolutely. So this is where, like in my dad's world, so he calls them the basic treatment guidelines. So there are certain things that are like your non-negotiables. So like with his brain protocol, for instance, like not these non-negotiables, like if you're gonna want to do the brain protocol, for example,
I want
we
to,
yes.
like,
So what I look at, the way I look at it now is like my job is to help prepare your terrain, help your nervous system prepare to do the brain protocol so that we can reset your nervous system, right? We
beautiful.
like it's good for everybody, but there's not like you have to prepare for it. So if you're somebody that, you cope with eating when you feel shame or, you feel abandonment all the time, so you drink or, smoke pot or whatever, nothing wrong with that. It's just recognizing that, why are you doing that?
Mm-hmm.
Like addiction's big. It's a big thing because it's all emotionally based at the end of the day. But you have to look at your DNA and you look at the epigenetics. Like this is your as my dad calls it, your learned perception. So we all have this learned perception of what's going on in our lives and whatnot. So what we want to do is we essentially want to reset and rewire the pieces. But my basic treatment guidelines is how we get there. So the basic treatment guidelines include like grounding, so walking barefoot, sunshine in the eyeballs. So like we talk about keep your eyes open. Well, getting the amount of sunlight that Andrew Huberman talks about all the
Yeah,
time.
he's done just the most amazing job for like
Yes. So
get up,
he's
get
like,
outside. Yeah.
yeah, get outside and get your 100,000 lux. And that's amazing because that's going to, like it's going to set the circadian rhythm path, the pineal gland, and all that stuff's going to help you with sleep, right? There's a whole reason for it. So, sunlight. So, I have my happy light on every morning. So, I get up in the morning, I literally poke my head out, I go walk in the grass. And if in the winter, I go walk barefoot in the snow.
I've seen, I was going to say, like, I've got it easy. I'm in Southern California, but you're
Yeah.
you're out there all year round in the snow.
Yes, all year round. And the reason I do so in the summer, I do cold face plunges. So people do full body plunges. My nervous system doesn't like it, so it's just something that I have to work up to. So when I'm really stressed, when my stress bucket is full, doing a cold plunge will help. But for me, doing homunculus, the whole term of your hands, your feet, and your face are
Mm-hmm.
huge. Brain thinks they're huge, so I expose those parts of my body. So those are something that are simple because I can like still be dressed and like add it into my morning routine. Sauna time, movement, some type of movement, but it's usually with the intention of my purpose. So my purpose in my life is connection. So when I move however I choose to move that day is really about connecting with me and all of my parts. So that's what I do. So it's basically, come out, sunlight, or happy light, depending on what time of year it is here, because we don't get a lot of sunshine here. So there's hydrotherapy, there's connection to my purpose, there's movement with that, sauna time, and then I'll have my supplements, my hydration. And I used to journal and do like some journaling and gratitude. I've moved away from that because I do it at night actually. So at
Mm-hmm.
night I do my ABCs of gratitude, which is basically you start with the letter A and you find something that you're grateful for that starts with the letter A. And then I go B, C, D, and that actually helps. And like I've only been able to get to M before I fall asleep. So it's like I go backwards, so
That's beautiful.
yeah, so it's a fun way to show gratitude for my day. And it's funny because like when I first started it, I always was like, I'm so grateful for my Apple products because I was
I was going to say apples, just like
my Apple products
my
for keeping me
applesauce
connected
dinner
to
and
the
my liver
world.
pate.
Yeah, right. And like so B would be for my breath and different things that that I'm
Mm-hmm.
grateful for that would connect me to like just my higher purpose. So those are the things. So like there are 17. So I did a podcast with my dad on the basic treatment guidelines. So the hardest one though is fun. Like, because he's been teaching this
Oh,
for like all of his patients, and I always ask him, I'm like, "What's the hardest one for your patients to do?" Fun. People don't know how to like. It's like we don't know how
people
to.
forget.
People do. And that's why for me, movement is fun. So
Yeah.
it's like, but it's like a lot of people need that, okay, I'm gonna move this way, I'm gonna do sets and reps, and they're just caught up on I have to
Very
do it right.
serious.
Yeah. And they're watching you. So like, as a movement coach, they're always watching you and they're comparing themselves to you. I'm like, don't look at me. This is like, I'm I'm a leap mover. I've been moving my entire life. Like you're just getting into this. So don't compare. Like you don't have to, it's not about that. I'm like, what feels good for you? So it's more about have fun with this. So that's what I love parkour and movement nat stuff. So I try to like get my two by fours out and walk on and jump on stuff or walk on rocks or whatever is fun for you, right? So nature is a big piece of the puzzle for me, and I got away from that in the winter because actually because I went to a park and my spidey senses went off and my nervous system's like, this is not safe, so I stopped walking. But I realized that I really enjoy walking, so I had to find a new location that was convenient, right? So it's these are things that I do on the regular. Nebulizing and castor oil packs are also the things that I do for my lymph that are like non-negotiable. So I keep adding. So once I do something, I keep adding to it. So I'm like, I never recommend anything to anyone if I can't do it, right? But I'm
Hmm.
like, I'm kind
You've
of
walked the
like that.
talk. You tried it
Yeah,
out.
like
Yeah.
yeah. So I'm like, I'm not going to tell you to do something that I haven't tried. However, I may suggest it for you depending on your story because it may work for you. It may not work for me, but it may work for you. So that's why I talk
Hmm.
about lymph. Like a lot of people don't know lymph. There's 4 different types of manual lymphatic drainage massage. Like people don't know that. They just know you lymph and cancer. That's pretty much what people know, right? And it's like, or I want to move my lymph because I want my face to look really good. I want to, get the collagen and get the wrinkles out or whatever. But they haven't really linked it A, to emotions, or B, to the immune system, or C, to the fascia, and how that impacts how I'm living day to day. Like that sore and stiffness, I tell my clients, like, you wake up sore, you got a lymph problem. If you wake up congested, you got a lymph problem. Let's take a look at that. And then so it's like, what can we do to support it? So that's why castor oil packs are like a non-negotiable, because we got to support the liver. And nebulizing, that actually came out from the pandemic, because many people, as we now know, like, some people got COVID, some people died, some people got long COVID, and some people, nothing happened, right? So what was the difference? And it was the minerals that we had in our bodies. So, many people are not absorbing nutrients because they don't have the right amount of minerals in their body. Like people are taking supplements, but they don't have the right minerals. So if you don't have the minerals, you can't absorb the nutrients. And I don't think people understand.
I say this all the time.
Yeah. And I think we're still missing, because you see all these great products, but people are like, somebody, approached me the other day, like, I sell Isogenics or Juice Plus. And I'm like, that's great. But if people don't have the basic nutrient combos for them to actually absorb it, you're just going to pee it out. And, even with hydration, like that was me. I was chronically dehydrated because the water I was consuming was staying outside
Not
of my
absorbed.
I wasn't absorbing it. So I was chronically dehydrated. And so that was part of my problem. But I'm like, because they're like, Julie, drink more. I was drinking 4 liters of water. And I'm like,
I can't drink anymore.
I can't drink anymore.
Yeah.
And that's why I tell people, I'm like, how much are you drinking and how much are you peeing? Because if you're just peeing it out, you're not absorbing it, my friend. So let's talk about, you know what I mean? So let's go find out your minerals. So that's why for me, it's really about, let's take a step back and look at all the pieces, right? It's not just like, I'm not somebody like, like you go to a cardiologist if you have a heart problem, you go to a neurologist if you have a brain problem, you have a foot problem, you go, to a chiropodist or a podiatrist, whatever. It just depends. Like, well, everybody teaches it separate. So, and then you hear people who are sick with cancer, for instance, it's like, I have an oncologist, and then I have, of all these different doctors, and nobody talks. And then it's frustrating because you're just like, I just want to get better. So that's why for me, like when I tell people, if you want to work with me, we need to do the basic treatment guidelines. Like those are non-negotiable. And then the eye drills.
I mean, it's fantastic. And I think also, I mean, I'm working mainly with women in their 40s and now mainly 50s and some in their 60s. And they'll say to me like, but like I eat really healthy and I exercise and I do this, but they're clearly not in health. They're not in a state of health. And having to kind of explain, like, you need to remineralize, like you're depleted in all of these ways. And I think it's so hard because I think, most of the food options available to people are crap. It's really poor. It's really, you can have an abundance of calories and a complete deficiency in nutrition. And so people who are, like they're eating whole real foods and they are highly educated and they're doing the research and they're listening to Huberman and they're listening to so-and-so and listening to so-and-so and they're taking the notes and they've paid thousands in courses and they're doing all this stuff. And they're still like, they're aching, they're stiff, their sleep is poor. They're kind of like, they're grumpy.
Yep.
They're just grumpy.
Yep.
And it's like, well, and yet people are very attached to these things. Like the resistance to telling people to have breakfast, and then God forbid you like bring back the lost art of lunch. And then it's like, and again, it's something, things that sound simple it's very relative, and it can be really, really hard just because behavior change is hard. But I want you to, can you expand and talk about, so what is the lymph system? What does it do? What role is this playing in all this wonderful world of interconnected health and wellness, and what health is to one person, and also this bioindividuality of what is healthy for this person may just be a toxic nightmare for this person as well.
Right. Well, that goes back, like, so to answer the last one, it's like we're all born with, I call it a stress bucket. And so we're all born with this, like based on your epigenetics and based on your DNA and your all of your experiences, your bucket may be already like full, and some people it may be empty. So your lymphatic system is simply, it's like your sewage system, it's your immune system, it's what it's doing. I think I call it, it's this white fluid of these like little white Pac-Mans going around gobbling up all the bacteria, the viruses, the toxins in your body, and it's trying to clean it out. And basically, like, think of it like a cloudy aquarium, right? So we have these filters and we have these pumps that are created, and we're trying to clean it all up so that it can move fluidly is the word I'm looking for, move fluidly through the system to help us boost our immunity, right? So it's all white blood cell count essentially. So I think many people don't understand that the lymphatic system is one way. Most people, so I was asking in my class last night, which way does the lymphatic system move? So many people think it's like gravity goes down, and it's actually the other way, it goes up. And they don't understand that the lymphatic valves have a one-way valve. So what happens is that people will get swelling behind in their ankles or behind their knee or in their groin, or their abdomen is a big one. And then, or, breast cancer in the armpits, get lymph nodes removed and whatnot. So what's important to understand, there's over 700 lymph nodes in your body, but they do not have a pump. So it's like God or whoever you believe in thought, it was like, I'm going to really force these people to move. So I'm going to create this really important system, the immune system, that helps us fight all the viruses and helps us evolve and procreate and keep us alive. I'm not going to create a pump for it. They have to move for it. So what's happened is that, the Industrial Revolution really killed humans, because since the Industrial Revolution, we've moved less, and things are so convenient. Like, you can call Uber, or, skip the dishes,
Outsource it
right?
all.
We outsource everything. So even like toilet seats are too high, even beds are really comfortable, even couches, they're really comfortable, and we don't sit on the floor anymore. And our chairs, they're just, everything's made for comfort, which then decreases our resilience. It basically decreases our window of tolerance. So then it's like whenever the wind blows or some kind of stress comes in, we are less tolerant. So we just like crumble, like, I can't handle this stuff. And so essentially, what you want to do with the lymph is understand that A, the direction matters, and B, like being kind to it. And I think, like, going back to what you're saying with your ladies, you're like, I'm still sleeping, I'm doing all the things. And this is what I see so much in the health and the fitness industry, or the health and wellness industry in general, is everybody's focused on the output. What can I do? We're not really focusing on what can I be. So what I mean by that is, like, when you understand the nervous system, really simply, the nervous system, how does it work? So essentially, we have something called neuroception, right? Neuroception is I'm in safe or I'm in danger. So at any given time, your nervous system's like, am I safe? So people who have fibromyalgia, basically, they're constantly on this loop of I'm in danger, I'm in danger, I'm in danger. It doesn't matter where I am in space, I'm constantly in danger, hence the flare up. So it's usually, it's when they have a flare, but they think it's like one thing that triggers it. And it's like, no. It's been like a whole series of things, but this one was, this was the one that broke
It's
the camel's
loudest.
Yeah, it's the loudest. So it's like, you haven't been paying attention to me, so now you will. So we're going to flame you. We're going to put fires everywhere in your body, specifically your lymph and your fascia, and we're going to make you really focus on slowing down and doing nothing, right? And so then we have to really, take our time to reemerge. So the idea is with the lymph is, or even with the nervous system, is stop focusing on the output, but focus on, so it starts, what are the 3 steps? Input. So we get some kind of emotional feedback. The autonomic nervous system is trying to tell, we get some kind of sensation in our body. Then your brain's like, okay, step 2, we have to process this. Is it safe or is it not? Then step 3 is we do the output, right? So where most people are going is like, what can I do? What can I do now? I think I feel this, or I've been in this constant loop, or this constant like trauma loop of when I feel this, I do this. And I've been trying different things, but you're still focusing on the trying or the doing. So I'm like, whoa, let's step back and let's take a look at what's the input. Where are you feeling it? Let's name it. And how do we connect with it? Because everybody who disassociates or is not in their body is really good at pushing it away and just disassociate it completely. I don't want to feel that because I'm like, feeling hurts. It
Mm-hmm.
can hurt. The reason you don't feel is because it hurts. This is nature
Yeah.
versus nurture. Nature has taught you, if you feel, you will die. That's basically what happens. Like, that's what my trauma taught me. If you feel, Julie, you're dead. You're going to die. So we're just going to stay busy and just keep learning and keep doing these things, because if we stop down and actually feel, it's going to hurt, and I'm going to be stiff, and I'm going to be sore, and I'm going to have to deal with all this stuff. But the key is that it's not wrong. You know, like when I feel shame, or when I feel alone, or when I feel despair or guilt or grief, I want to
Mm.
sit with it. That's like that's therapy world, talk. But what I like to say is like to hold space for it. Instead of doing something to move away from it, how about we hold space for it and really address that input and be like, hey, hi shame, hi guilt, hi grief. I'm gonna bring it in. I'm gonna give it a big hug. It's like, just treat it like, a little child, or treat it like your best friend, and just bring it in and be like, okay, what do you need from me? I want you to know that you're safe. Everything's going to be okay. You're not alone. You're enough. You're loved. You're connected. Everything's going to be okay. So we're having these thought process, but that's what we're not doing.
Mm-hmm.
Right. So we're just so focused on that output, and we're just so focused on doing the thing. So that's what I'm seeing in the lymphatic world now, is that we're just focused on doing the dry skin brushing, or doing the castor oil packs, or doing deep breathing. It's not that. You're still missing the point. The reason your lymph is congested is because you're not connecting to the emotions that are clogging up your system, right? That
Mm-hmm.
are impacting, because stress impacts. When you're stressed, what happens? You get sick, right? That's when we get stressed too much, we get sick, and that's your lymphatic system. So the idea is there's a missing piece that a lot of people are not looking at. And so it's scary, because you're like, oh my God. And the thing too is, we don't have the language. I mean, I certainly
Mm-hmm.
don't have the language either. Like, I don't know what that is. A friend of mine, we were going to take a shame course. I'm like, I don't think I'm going to take it, because I don't think I have shame. And then it kind of sparked that. I'm like, wait a
Or
second.
do I?
Exactly. I'm like, but the thing is, I did so good at pushing it away that I'm like, I didn't know. And I'm like, but when I held space for it, I'm like, oh, that's what shame feels like. Okay. So then I'm like, I held space for it. I'm like, okay, shame, you want to sit with it? Let's go. So let's sit with this, right? So a lot of people think it's like literally me sitting in a corner and being like, hey, this is me in shame, like on a swing, and just, but it's not that. It can be all of the things you're doing. It can be your movement. It can be your eating. It can be socializing. It could be whatever your output is. But what you're doing is you're actually bringing intention to holding space for whatever emotion that is, right? And your lymph is all part of that. And that's the
Mm-hmm.
cool part. And so it's kind of, that's the door that I use. And so, when people have swelling, like that was my big thing. Like, how I got into my lymph journey really recently is that I started getting bloody noses, and I didn't know why, just like random. I was like, hey, that's not right. But I was always clogged on my left sinus. So then when I do a little bit more research, and I'm curious about my own, like, what's this causing? I then learned it's from my stomach and my spleen. Stomach and spleen have to do with worry. Well, I've been
Mm-hmm.
worried for a long time. And so it's just like, you understand the emotion. So when I brought my awareness to this worry, guess what happened to my nosebleeds? They went away.
Yeah.
Weird.
Yeah.
And
And
I
I,
didn't
yeah.
realize
And I think it's so extraordinary. I mean, there's so much, conventional dialogue, which is, and especially around movers and athletes, which is like, I've got a, I've got a bad shoulder.
it.
So it's a muscle problem, or oh, I've got really tight quads.
Mhm.
And it was such a, um, it was a very seismic belief change for me. And it's been a whole path of education. And this came through Dr. Steve Gangemi, and then my friend Jared Tavasolian, through the work that they do of applied kinesiology, and them being movers, and this combination of applied kinesiology and nutrition
Mm.
and emotional health and understanding around that. So, and I remember like Steve saying to me, like, it's like, nah, like 70 to 90% of injuries. He was like, it's nutrition and emotions. And but
Great.
people are like, no, but it's the muscle. Like, it's not like it's not in my no, it's my quad. It's my quad. And you're like,
Mm.
no, that relates to an organ. This organ has this. Is there a nutrient deficiency there? What's the associated emotion? The organs have the hierarchy over like the bicep or the quad.
Yep.
And if they don't have enough energy, they'll borrow it from somewhere else.
Right.
And if you're draining it because you're thinking this and think, but that is like, that's a huge shift from a
Yes.
Western dialogue of
Yes.
bicep hurts, bicep problem.
Hmm.
And then
Yeah.
someone's like, I mean, the first time Steve treated me, he was like, yeah, you've got a B3 deficiency in your left kidney. I was like, excuse me? And he was like, yeah, it's the cerebellum as well. What the hell are you talking about?
I love it.
You know, and so, you know, there's been times where I thought like, had I not just the good fortune and the serendipity to be in
Right.
these places where I moved, I was in these movement environments where I found other people who were moving and drawn to this, and then they happen to be doing these other things, and it's always like this little thing you say
Mhm.
that reveals everything. And I remember saying to Steve, we were doing dive rolls. Like we were in West Virginia. It was like it's probably like things like 12 years ago on a movement kind of event, and we had to do these dive rolls on the grass, and I was like, oh god, no, like doing them on the left side, it just makes me want to cry. I can't approach things from the left. It just like
Mhm.
it's not even physical. I was like, I just cry. And he was like, oh, I can work on that for you, that's fine. And then he started like doing this, like, okay, we're here, look up, left, down, right,
That's
and
exactly
like
what I would do.
it's hectic, it's really hectic. And it's like down, like, okay, up, right, now, look down,
Mhm.
down, look at your nose there. Now do this, do that, right? Hold this thing here. Okay, hold your fingers here, like da 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 da. Okay,
Yep.
try the roll again now. And I'm like, okay. Then I'm
Mhm.
like,
What happened?
wow,
Yep. It's
fairy
all
dust, fairy
connected.
dust, fairy dust.
But that's what I do. And people are like, how do you do that? I'm like,
Yeah,
I don't know. It's hard to explain, but it's just
yeah,
like he's been able to connect the dots, just like I have.
yes.
He's done it.
I should
He's
connect the two of you. This,
totally. Oh,
yeah,
it'd be amazing. Well, because the idea is, like he's learned it through his experiences, just
yep,
as I have, right? And
yep.
so same thing with you. And I think that's what's awesome is that because you have the opportunity to meet these people, you have a platform that you can share and share this with the world because it's so, like you said, it's not mainstream whatsoever. I'm like, we're definitely ahead of our time, not gonna lie. Like Europe is definitely ahead of us, probably five,
Mm-hmm.
10 years in the fitness and health stuff. We've always been trailing with this, but at the end of the day, um, we're laying the foundation for opportunity and for hope and um, for the opportunity for people to get
Mm-hmm.
move and feel better. And like, because we all know sleep is so important, but emotions are definitely part of it. Like we could literally take apart every system and be like,
Mm-hmm.
all of them are important, but how do you, so it can get overwhelming too. Cause she's like,
Yeah,
oh my
well,
God.
yeah. It's a control stress. Then it's like, so hang on, I have to wake up and I need to go outside. Okay. Maybe I failed at that because I woke up really late and then I didn't. And then, okay, now I'm supposed to eat this or do this or then do that. And like the protocols are like,
Yeah.
it's a control stress. And for me, I don't thrive on structure and list. I'm very intuitive and creative. And so planning and structure, I avoid like the plague.
Right.
And I'm really out of balance. Like I need, and I have coaches now who really work with me on strategy and structure
Right.
because I'll go rogue every opportunity.
Really? Well,
I'll
it's
go
interesting
rogue.
because the brain, like the second thing the brain wants is predictability because that's what makes it feel safest. So when you understand the brain wants two things, oxygen, and if it can't get that, it's going to go to glucose. So that's
Exactly. Yeah.
right. So then I'm
Yeah.
like, why do you have your cravings? Because you're not breathing. Fix
Yeah.
your breathing, you'll fix the glucose. Yay.
Yeah.
Check. Then the second thing the brain wants is predictability. So routine. So if you understand too, like the way a human develops is the adrenals first and your kidneys first. So it's like, if you understand that, it's like, okay, well, the thing is, like if you're struggling with that routine and that, so we need to take a look at the adrenals and your
Mm-hmm.
kidneys. So we can look at it emotionally, we can look at it mentally, we can look at it physically, we can look at it, there's all these different layers that you can look at it and be like, okay, this is how we can get there, right? So I think, to me, that's exciting
It
that,
is.
like you have this, like there's this whole world of how I can, explore and be
Yeah.
curious and see what happens. And what I mean? I can improve this. Absolutely. So yeah. So like
It's
it's wherever you want to go, really, at the end of the day.
Yeah, I mean, I talked to Jared a lot about so Jared Tavasolian, he's a friend who I created our version of movement snacks, kind of with these like nervous system, but like starting with breath work,
Mm-hmm.
nervous system resets, then
Mm-hmm.
mobility to have this like 360 strong, these rotations, these movement patterns which aren't explored, that
Right.
like I want you to say hello to. And Jared has, he's applied kinesiologist, he has nutrition, he's an elite level mover. And I'm like, so I think we should just, I mean, basically just mess around on the floor.
Yeah.
Like just like we can get fancy, we can get, but please, like people just spend some time, just mess around on the floor.
Mm-hmm.
Like,
That's what MoveNet really is, though, too, right? Just
yeah. And like mess around on the floor and like go out and think about how you move through the world. I want you to question these power relations of how and where you move and
Mhm.
why you're moving in this way and why you're not moving in that way. And I give you permission to be the person who says it's more fun to walk along on the little wall than to just keep walking on the pavement. Because
That's,
every kid in the world, I
yeah.
remember like being dragged like into town on a Saturday afternoon with my mum because she had to go shopping for whatever. And there was this subway we'd walk through, and there was this wall on the left. And it was just like walking into town, like boring. Saturday afternoon, boring. Shopping with mum, boring. And I just wanted to walk on top of the wall.
Mm-hmm.
And at some point, 99.9% of adults go, get down from there.
Yep.
Walk nicely, sit properly, just walk here, do this, do that. And it crushes us a little bit. It crushes that movement environment. And there's such a big gap between, you know, conventional norms, which keep society functioning at a nice and steady level, and complete anarchy, flash mobs of movement everywhere. It's like
Yeah.
there's a whole movement life that can happen in between those two spaces
Mm-hmm.
for people.
Mm-hmm.
And it's also just to give people back their own permission to play, to give people back their own permission to move, to be so serious where, it's like, daydream. It's really nice for your eyes. Like daydream. Like even when I was doing more film work and doing a lot of editing, like I do a lot of screen time,
Mm-hmm.
but my eyesight for my age is really, really good. And I honestly think just the saving grace is I regularly daydream a lot within 1 hour. I'm like, da 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 da, drift.
Right.
And I've always had windows and things with green things outside. I need I need my nature spaces, whether it's the ocean or the mud or a tree, or I remember having a kitchen shelf that was just full of orchids. I was just like flowers, flowers, flowers. Just, put them everywhere. And I think this and that's self-empowerment,
Mm-hmm.
that permission to play. And I was looking at your website before coming on here, and you were talking, yeah, and like just these key phrases of like the emotional body, the safe body, and how to get out of pain, and how that manifests also in your posture.
Mm-hmm.
And to have a movement life is a different life. And people, I think, have this very, or I used to have this idea of like life coaching was just something for really flaky people who weren't really together. And there were a lot of charlatans posing as life coaches.
Sure.
And then I met some life coaches who were like, okay, I have so much education, emotional education, that has simply not been present as through any part of my other education, which has been complete and conventional and at high level to societal norms. But this kind of education, it's MIA. It's just like where, so where can people start?
Oh, that's a great question. And I guess it depends on where you are. My
Yeah.
answer is going
Yeah.
to be it all depends on where are you. So
Mm-hmm.
it's about starting, like a lot of people think about, so you talked about, change is hard, behavior change specifically is hard. I mean, there's been a gazillion one books written on it. And at the end of the day, the one piece that we're not looking at is the autonomic piece, is the emotional piece. Like people try to change their behavior based on a neocortex, very cerebral, very I'm going to think my way through this. Like it's
Disciplined,
willpower.
stoic. Oh.
Yes, very, and it's still very, to me, it's still very it's archaic in the sense that we're not bringing in this emotional piece. So where do people start is just start bringing awareness to how do you feel on a day-to-day basis. So you wake up in the morning, start off by printing an emotional wheel. If you have no idea of, like, you don't have the vocabulary, if you want a vocabulary, you can pick up Brene Brown's book, and there's 87 of them in Atlas of the Heart. That's can be overwhelming because, like, that book helped me realize that anxiety can be a state or it can be a trait depending on your stress bucket. I had no idea. And there's other words that are like that. So it helped me, open the door to help me understand that most people know basically 7 common emotions. And then when you look at them, I'm like, surprise. I'm not really familiar with surprise. And the thing for me too is like happy. A lot of people are like, are you happy? My husband used to ask me all the time, are you happy? I don't know. I don't know what it feels like to be happy. What does happy feel like? So then I'll ask you, what does it feel like to be happy? So they're like, well, you feel joy. I'm like, I don't know
I'm
what
not
that
worried
feels
about
like.
stuff. Happiness is the absence of something else.
Right. And
Yeah.
so it's like, how do you know it's happy? So then me being curious, I'm like, I don't know. How do you not know you're happy or not? I don't know. And so then you get mad at me and I'm like, why are you mad? I'm just telling you this is how I feel. And so then people are like, well, then they discount how I feel. It's like, well, that's stupid or something like that, right? And then I'm like, well, I feel like a schmuck because I don't know what happiness feels like, but I don't, like, I'm not familiar with that language. However, through some work, I realized happiness is something that I am not familiar with because that's how I protected myself, right? Because when I was happy, the shoe would always fall, the other shoe would always drop, and something bad would always happen when I was happy. So connection, though, you asked me, Julie, do you feel connected? Yes, I know what that feels like. I know, like, all my cells tingle
Mm-hmm.
and I get very excited, and I'm like, connection. Now that's the language. So where do people start is just start understanding the language of your body by just what sensations are showing up in your body, right? At the end of the day. So I have, like, in my master class, in the second class, I have a wheel that we start off with. The goal is for you to create your own wheel. Like, that's what my intention is for you to eventually, but it's a very difficult exercise. So I have one girl was messaging me, she's like, I don't even know where to start. I'm
Mm-hmm.
like, that's where you start right there. She's like, I don't know, but I don't know. I feel stuck. That goes on your wheel because that's what you're familiar with, right? And she's like, oh, okay. So we overcomplicate it, right? And I
Mm-hmm.
think this is the thing, is that we, as a society, unfortunately, have been stuck in this survival state, we're not thriving, we're surviving. And it's because we're not tuning into sensations. What are these sensations that are showing up on my body? So, like, when my shoulder hurts, it's like, okay, I'm going to rub it. I'm going to go to physio. I'm going to do these specific exercises and whatever. I'm like, okay, what could it be emotionally tied to? So what's been showing up in your life lately? People don't ask those questions
Mm-hmm.
enough themselves, or are prompted to, right? You might if you go to therapy, but therapy, again, is still very a top-down approach. So, like, 'cause they're not going to ask you what's showing up in your body. In
Mm-hmm.
my experience, my therapist never asked me what was going on in my body. None of mine did. But, so that's where it's like you learn from your experiences and then you're like start piecing these parts together. But, if someone, is listening to this and you're like, okay, where do I go? Well, I'm going to suggest that, when you wake up in the morning, just sit for a second, and just see what sensations are showing up in your body. And just start, documenting it, journaling it, and see like, oh, like when you send an email, or you had a confrontation with somebody at, a family member or somebody at work, did your jaw tense? Like, do you wake up with your jaw locked? Are your hands clenched? Do your knees hurt during certain, like when you go upstairs? What situations, what's showing up in your body? And just start journaling it. And we're just going to bring awareness, because awareness brings understanding, and understanding brings choice. And I think this is where people get stuck, is that they don't feel they have a choice. Like, my choice is take drugs, or I have to pay for some unaffordable therapist, or treatment or coaching or whatever that I can't afford. I'm like, there's so many things that you can do for yourself, right? But it's really, instead of just focusing on the output, let's focus on the input, would be my answer.
Love it. And what are you doing for fun right now?
Me, it's going for walks.
Nice.
Like every day so I meet with friends. So the social piece, so my nervous system, that's the thing. Co-regulation's it's a real thing. So I phone a friend and we go for walks along a lake. So that's the thing too, is that I realize I love water, but I love moving water. I don't like still water. So that's something that it's like, I love movement. I love flow. And so being aware. So sometimes I prefer actually walk around along creeks, and because the lake here is pretty still. Sometimes on a windy day it'll move, but it's pretty still. So it's like, I don't know, it's not the same. It doesn't do it the same. Like, I can feel it. And that's where I was like, oh, that's what that feeling is. So we bought a cottage on a river, not on a lake, because I like the movement, and I like kayaking, and I love movement. And so movement in nature and movement in my own body. Because, the joke is like, it's kind of a joke. It's a joke. My parents had me tested when I was a kid, because they thought there was something wrong with me, because I wouldn't stop moving. So they're like, what is wrong with this kid? So right out of the gate, for me, I thought there was something wrong with me, because I love to move. But now I've made a career out of it. And it's like, well, I moved. They always put me in sports because I wouldn't stop moving. And then I was always told, Julie, sit down, be quiet, whatever. And then I was blessed with I had a shoulder injury. And so I was blessed with, kind of like you, as I was blessed with people that I didn't end up getting the surgery. I ended up healing myself more through acupuncture and more holistic type of modalities. I did a lot of strength training, got better, and started learning eye drills and the neurology part of things. And now my shoulder, because I was
so happy shoulder.
Yeah, I have a healthy shoulder. Like, I couldn't wash my hair, and I had a stick shift at the time. I couldn't drive my car. I couldn't wash my hair at the time. So I'm like, oh. So I remember, like, I'd have to bend down to wash my hair. It's like brutal. I could not lift my arm. And I'm like, ugh. And they're like, just have surgery. And I'm like, what are some other options? So I've been blessed with it, I guess, a curious mind. And I've always asked that question. I think that's why I did the academic thing for so long. Because then the thing is, I don't really tell people I have degrees. I'm like,
I didn't know you had a PhD until I watched one of your YouTube videos. Your intro one. I was like, interesting.
Yeah, I'm another Julie with a PhD.
Yeah, I love it. Like, who's a movement coach? And
it's to me, it's not important. It's a piece of, like, the reason I did it is it's for trauma response. The reason I did it is because I was doing it to appease my parents.
I did mine because I didn't want to work in television.
Well, there you go. There you go.
I just wanted to carry on doing fun projects,
right?
But it gave me something to say I was doing for many years.
Yeah,
because otherwise I just sounded really flaky.
Did you need the title?
Oh yeah, I want the letter P, the letter H, the letter D. Because I'm not I take what I do seriously, but I'm not inherently a very serious, stern person. So even like within film work and stuff, I do projects for people. And at the end they'd always be like, don't take this the wrong way, or don't be offended, but like, it's really good. As if to say, like, you seemed a bit flaky, or you seem like you don't present as though you're going to make something of excellence.
Right.
Like, I'm not polished. I don't brush my hair. I don't, I'm not, I'd rather tell a joke and swear and be, kind of, because that's my way of being at ease. Like, I'm much more comfortable walking around barefoot somewhere than not. I'm not and, and that's why television was like, I love the creative process. I like moving images. I like, sound and vision and communicating meaning, but I actually just really love abstract cinema and stuff like that as well. But I like documentary. And then, oh God, you've got to kind of be quite fashionable when you work in television. And then you need to like be doing not all, like I know some incredible documentary makers as well. And like, working on film dramas and stuff, it's amazing, but it's a city, it's this immersive bubble where like there is no life
Right.
outside, and everyone wants to stay up late and drink. And I'm like, I like to go to bed at 9:30 and I don't drink, and I like to get up really early.
Yeah.
And I really miss my dog. And yeah, I'm just not prepared to do. And also I'm not a yes person. If they're like, yeah, but Julie, this thing really matters, and I'd be like, you're not curing malaria here. You're making an entertainment program. Like, let's be real about it. Like, so it's but yeah, it gave me a veneer of adulting very well.
Mm-hmm.
And then I'm not, now I'm clever but funny. Whereas where
Right.
I'm just like funny and a bit of a mess. And Julie's an eternal student who like, when's she going to get a proper job?
Right.
And it was always like, I'm just really curious. Like, why do you want me to go there when there's
Mm-hmm.
all this to explore?
Right.
Like, I don't know, like life just, and I think that's why anthropology really drew me in, because I was like, oh, I'm just curious about all these different ways of being. And
Mm-hmm.
let's understand difference, and let's see what can the parkour world share with, I don't know, investment banking? What can the parkour world share with
Cool.
mediation and peacemaking and conflict resolution? And it turns out actually for those two, it's kind of saying it's about risk, it's about creativity, it's about imagination, it's about new possibilities and ways of being, and about things being in movement. There's a reason peace talks happen when people walk together. There's all and I only know that because I have a friend who's deep into the conflict resolution and peacemaking world. And
Oh,
every
really?
time I talked about parkour, she was like, this is like the handbook for peacemakers. Are you serious like that? And I was like, yeah, like it's what? And so it was like, oh, same. That's cool. And
That's true. It's true to see that how a lot of the principles are interwoven among
yeah.
different industries and whatnot. And I think that's, that there's that foundation piece, right? And that's the thing is actually the first time I ever heard you speak was during a parkour, like Rafe had
Oh, one of Rafe Kelly's ones. Yeah. The
one
embodiment
of his
conference. Yeah.
events, I guess you
Events.
could say. Yeah. So that's the first time I heard you speak about it. And like you were like the only woman that was
Yep.
like talking about parkour.
Yes. I was probably the only woman. I know that, yeah, there was one. I think Juliet Starr did a small section, but it was a practical something. But like, I was the only female speaker talking about embodied movement.
Right.
And I was like, that's ridiculous.
That it's yeah.
It's
Agreed.
ridiculous.
It's
Like,
ridiculous.
but it's also, and I said that to Rafe, but it's also, it was just a reflection of what he's interested in. And he's like, I'm not in touch with these women. Who should I get? And I was like, well, you can speak to this person, this person. And so for the next event they did, there were a lot more women.
Okay.
So I think there's also to be kind of, fair to Rafe, but also I see that across the board everywhere. Like I've been at so many events where I am the female speaker.
Really, eh?
And and for me it's weird when it's in a movement context also, because I'm like, I didn't come up through fitness, and I'm really glad I didn't. Like
You bring a different
because
perspective.
but also I think this multidisciplinary approach, and it meant I had no dogma about anything.
Exactly.
Like in the fascia world, I ended up filming like John Sharkey and Joanne Averson's dissections they were doing. And they're standing in a room full of body workers and Pilates teachers and saying, there isn't it doesn't stretch.
Right.
It unfolds and it glides. And I'm
Right.
like, okay, that makes sense to me.
Mhm.
But there's people with like decades of like, we talk about stretching.
Yeah.
And you could see like there's this resistance. And I'm like, I'm just a sponge. I'm like, I think about, okay, that's that. And Graham Shaw does his presentation, and we look at nature, and we look at spirals, and we look at this, and we look at that. And I'm like, sold. That makes sense.
Different theories. Absolutely. It's true
And
because like fascia, well, just to go back with the fascia thing, fascia's changed so much. Like the knowledge that we have from
They're
like 10
rewriting
years.
the anatomy books. It's
Oh, yeah,
it's like we only know what we know.
absolutely. Well, the fact that going back to the lymphatic system, the glymphatic, the brain part was only discovered in 2013. I'm like 10
Yeah.
years ago. We didn't
Nasal
even
nitric
know,
oxide,
right?
only the 90s.
It's
Like,
crazy.
what an amazing time to be alive.
I know we have so much that we're learning, and we still like we're just like literally scratching the surface. Like we're still at the tip of the iceberg, and as we know, icebergs, there's so much more underwater that we have to learn. And I think that to me is like that's what makes this exciting, and that whole opportunity to like, okay, what's under this rock
Yeah.
and what's
Like,
under
ooh,
this, right? What can we
interesting.
learn here? Absolutely. And and it doesn't have to exist in separate entities. It can be
Yeah.
all blend, like you're saying with the whole parkour, it can blend in. There's a lot of synchronicity in these different modalities. And I'm like, I believe that every modality will work. Every modality will help.
There's value. There's value across everything. There's always
Absolutely.
value. Like
It's, yeah.
when people are so like I loved what you said at the beginning, like you're a generalist.
Mhm.
And that's me. I'm always like, well, but like I don't have any fixed ideas. I would never say to anyone like, don't ever do CrossFit. But like, personally, I don't do it because I hurt myself. I have a mindset that can like push through when given the chance. And for me personally, I find it boring.
Right.
There's just not an emotional interest or curiosity. It's like, do this drill, this physical thing. Well, for other people, that's the best day ever. Okay, there's still value in that, and there's value in this and that. But it's some people are very adamant. Other than like, don't jump in front of a moving train. A lot of it's like we miss the nuance, we miss the value, and then there's other dots that could have been connected.
Mhm.
I find so I love it. So I mean I love your work, and I love and like you've grown online.
Yeah,
I don't did you have a like a viral moment, or did
I
it because
did. I
what
did.
was that?
So it was a lymphatic video actually. So
Nice.
last summer, so about two summers ago, I started dancing more and expressing myself
I
without,
remember you dancing more.
yeah.
Yes.
So I kind of shifted, and that's where I was like kind of the tail end of my trauma course with my coaching. And I'm like, you know what? Because it's like my mom was always the dancer, and I'm like, and I don't know how to dance, and I've always been like so apprehensive about it. And like I have had every body image issue you can imagine. So body image has been, that was my whole master's thesis, was have to do with body image issues and whatnot. So I've struggled with my own. And so the fact that I'm like, oh my God, I'm going to put myself in front of these people and I'm just going to like dance. And I'm
Ooh,
like, I don't
dance.
know what I'm doing. But it was more about, as my coach said, it's more about embodying my feminine. So I realized through part of my work is that I am someone who I'm a feminine energy, but I've been wearing a masculine mask. So it's very much like for me to survive. And I think a lot of women are like this, is that in
Mm-hmm.
order for us to be successful, even in
Mm-hmm.
academia,
Oh, I
for
mean,
us,
every industry I've worked in is male dominated.
especially
Film,
like fitness.
film,
Yeah, yeah.
photography,
Mhm.
movement, academia, all male
Yes,
dominated.
all very male. So it's very much you have to have your masculine mask to get along. And like it's all about befriending the right people and getting in front of the right people and whatnot. So that's how I survived. That's how I got this far. And then my coach was like, we need to start embodying your feminine. So me being masculine energy, and I'm like, well, how do you do that? Okay, what are the steps? And I'm like, I don't know what that
Give me a
means.
protocol.
Give me a protocol of what I need to do. Like, give me the ABCs. And she's like, that's not being feminine. That's the exact opposite. And I'm like, I don't know. So she's like, I just want you to express.
Explore.
So on Instagram, that was the platform that I used because I realized now, because now that I know that connection. So when I was healing, my purpose changed 3 times in 3 months. Like I was healing really quick because I
Amazing.
was like, I guess my body, I just needed that door to open. So finally landed on connection for my purpose. So my purpose for Instagram was for me to connect. And that's all I was posting was like, how will this connect with other people? And that's all I was trying to, that was in my mindset. And so I started doing that and it started growing a little bit. But then last summer in June, I had a lymphatic video of me just dancing and I'm literally just shaking to pump up the jam, and I'm just like bouncing a little bit and just shaking my body or whatever, and it went viral. So then from
Amazing.
there, it kind of snowballed, and then yeah, so then it's like it goes up and down. Like in January, I lost like 9,000 followers, and then I recently, like 2 weeks ago, I did the brain brace, trauma informed brain based movement. So I was just doing some like neurological drills and
I
stuff.
just found, I just got a course on that recently, and it's
Oh yeah.
like
Yeah.
there's like you can tell I obviously haven't been
Well,
doing
because
it
like
much.
you want to test the cerebellum with the movement, right? So it's like teaching people how to like assess, like,
Yeah,
are we in balance? Do we need to do figure eights? Because if the hemispheres aren't
yeah,
firing, then I can get it from the eyes. But just understanding, like I was doing it in my class last night to get
yeah.
people
Love it.
to do this stuff,
Like I
right?
remember like all these things, and
Yes. And then being able to touch,
yeah,
right? And then cover it up.
love
And
it, love it. Yeah,
yeah.
yeah.
So anyway, I had that. So then I got those 9,000 followers back because you never know what's going to
It's
go.
so
And
random.
so it's like, I realize now I have a voice because that's something that I always talk to, because I'm like, I say the same thing everybody else is saying. And it's just like, um, what's different? And what's different is I started
It's
embodying my
you.
feminine. It's me. It was me
Yeah,
being vulnerable, and that's why. And then every time it's like I don't post dancing ones, and then people every time like yesterday I posted one about I was kind of dancing with my feet or whatever, and people are like, "I love your energy," and it's like I do have this energy, and I do have a voice,
yeah,
and I do like to have fun, and I am. And the thing is, my mom was always the funny one, and she was always my voice, and that's what I realized. Like I'm like, oh, I am kind of funny sometimes,
I think you're funny.
and so
Like
that's
I love
why.
your energy. Like
Yeah, so
it's
that's
just
where
so
it's
cool.
like on Instagram, like I like doing spoofs sometimes with
Yeah,
people,
your
and
Wes Anderson spoof. I was like,
yes,
wow, this is so
yeah.
good,
So that's,
so good.
having fun that way. That's how I have fun sometimes. But then I find
Nice.
that like when I post Instagram, it's very much what you see that day is how I'm feeling.
Yeah,
It's very inspired by, like, I don't have a scheduler. I have
yeah,
stuff
yeah,
in the bank, but what I'll do is I'll go through and I'm like, how do I feel today? And
yeah,
then I'll post that, or I'll share
yeah, yeah,
whatever's on the docket kind of thing. So I've loved Instagram for that because it's given me a platform to be expressive,
yeah.
for me to connect with others. And it's funny, it's like people are connecting with me because it's me, and I'm like, what do you like about me? I'm like, I'm just a regular old person, but I'm like, I guess I do have something to share
I
with
mean,
the
I think
world.
you give huge educational value as well.
Well, that's what I used to hide. I hide behind
Yeah,
the education mask. I'm like, I have lots of degrees and lots of certifications.
expertise, expertise,
Yes.
expertise.
And this is
Yeah.
what I was focused on. But that's why
Hmm.
it's like people will ask me about, neurology, or they're asking me about lymph, or they'll ask me about muscles, they'll ask me about joints. I'm like, I have an answer because I've
Hmm.
been there. I've done that. I
Yeah,
understand. Like, okay, have you done cars? No, what's that? And so it's like, what, you don't know? And like, or even MoveNat. And
yeah,
so it's been an evolution, and so I just kind of take people along the journey with me, right? And it's like I do take time to go for walks. I do take time to, the mind shift of being
hmm,
more positive. Like
yeah,
I am I'm really good at putting myself down. Like I'm not good enough, and I'll never be good enough because I live in the shadow of my dad, who is a giant in the naturopathic biological medicine world. Like he's a giant, but now that's why I created a podcast with him. Is actually I just created it so I can heal my relationship with him. Like that's the people don't know
amazing.
that, but it's just it was a part of me that I'm like, he was never there when I was growing up because he was too busy healing the rest of
Hmm.
the world. So
Hmm.
I'm like,
Hmm.
you know what? We can
My
create, like,
time.
it's my time. It's my
My
turn.
time.
I want to do this before it's too late, right?
Hmm.
So, yeah, so I'm really grateful that Instagram took off, and like some days it's funny because you look at the video, sometimes they take off, sometimes they don't. I'm like, you know what? There's one I posted, I'm just sitting in my swing with my dog, one of my dogs, and it was just a trauma talk over. And
Hmm.
I'm like, I didn't, anyway, I just posted it. I didn't, I was like, I don't know what to post today. So I just posted it, and it landed, and it hit I got
It
so many people,
resonated. Yeah.
it resonated. And I'm like, this is why I keep showing up every day,
Yeah.
because I don't know who's going to see it when they, and who's going to
Hmm.
see it or when they need to see it. But that's the thing, is like, that's why I keep showing up, because and then if you get into human design, my friend keeps reminding me I'm a generator. So it's
Yeah.
my energy is very much like, I'm going to generate some ideas for
Yeah.
you, and then you can like take the ball and
Then
run
you,
with it
here
however
you
you see.
go. Here you
Here
go.
you go.
Yeah.
So that's why I talk about like, being barefoot and getting sunlight and spending time in nature. Like there's some basic common denominator things that we have to master before we
Yeah.
heal chronic pain or trauma. We just can't go and like, okay, let's remove the trauma. Like you can do the emotion code trick, sure. But if you're still in a state of protection, it's not going to
It's not
work.
going to, yeah, it's not
Like,
going to stick.
right?
Yeah.
You can do CBT or you can do
Mm-hmm.
EMDR, but
Mm-hmm.
if you're not doing the work and you're just looking for the practitioner to heal you or to fix you and to release the trauma, you're just focusing on the output. And that's where
Yeah.
I'm like, I have to keep showing up to remind people there's an
Yeah.
input. What's the input? How can I support you in discovering what this input is? And the thing is that it's scary. It can be scary because it's new, right? And it can be scary because we don't know what's going to show up. And
Mm-hmm.
so and that's why, like in therapy, they're like, we have to talk about your trauma. That's what I love about the body. I'm like, we don't have to talk about trauma. We don't have to talk about what happened to you. The body will just let it go, right?
Mm-hmm.
So I had a client this week, and she was asking me, like, when she lays on the peanut, like I love the peanut just for the grounding and the pressure and working on fear and the meridians and all that stuff. Anyway, when she does it, she gets her legs twitch. The one leg twitches a lot, and she's like, "What is that?" And so we're just talking about how her body's processing emotions and whatnot, and this is just a way for her to release whatever emotions are showing up at the time. And then, but recently it shifted. Her toes, she twinkles her toes. So she'll point her toes and then she wiggles them. She's like, this is really new for me. What is that all about? And I said, that's just your body just expressing whatever's showing up for you at the time. She's like, oh. So that's why a lot of people think that like healing trauma looks like convulsion, deep crying,
Yeah.
pain.
Drama. It's
Like,
heroic moments.
yeah, like,
Yeah.
oh, like all this stuff. And, like you watch Human
Exorcist.
Garage. Yeah, like you watch Human Garage and you see these people like, oh, whatever, right? I'm like, it's not always like that.
Can be
It
really
doesn't.
subtle.
Yes, it can be very, very subtle. And it could be a yawn, it could be passing gas, it could be a
Mm-hmm.
twitch, it can be anything autonomic. That's where it lives, people. So when you
Yeah.
really understand that autonomic nervous system, I'm like, then let's start this conversation and go from there. So I feel like now, like my shift is really like not enough people talk about the autonomic piece of the
Mm-hmm.
nervous system. It's more, I don't know, other
Shiny
pieces,
stuff. Yeah.
other stuff, I guess. But I'm like, I don't know many people that talk about the autonomic nervous system. Maybe
Yeah.
the somatic world a
Mm-hmm.
bit more, but they don't talk about it from the physiological piece. They don't understand like what's actually happening in the brain. It's just like these are feelings, more interoception. So
Mm-hmm.
to me, the somatic world is very much side door approach. We're going to come in from the mammalian brain, from the limbic brain, and then we're going to go up or down depending on what's what. Not that it's wrong, and by any means, it's just that might meet those that, for my art people, my ADHD people, like understanding, like I don't think people understand like ADHD is just, it's a trauma response. So it's just the way your body, is responding based on all these emotions and all the stress that you've been under. So it's a survival response. Cool. When you understand that, so then
Then work with it. Yeah.
how do we work with this? And that's
Yeah.
great. So we can go bottom up, side door. Side door is really fantastic for ADHD people because that's really like they're just feeling all the feels, and that's that their creativity. That's where they thrive, is in that creative space, right? So allowing that space and being, knowing that A, you're not alone, and B, that there is hope, right? And I think that's where a lot of us don't feel that we have that choice, right? But there is. Because again, awareness brings understanding, brings choice.
Yeah. And I mean, I just love, and I'm so happy that you have your voice. I'm so happy that there is this platform.
Yeah.
And I think the fact that it's funny, like, so yourself, a friend of mine, Wendy in the UK, who does reclaim movement. So her clip that went viral was like her squatting next to her washing machine with a cup of coffee.
Hmm.
And it was just about how, these everyday movements that she could bring in. There's a lady who lives like half an hour away from me here, Debo Fit. She's in her 60s, very strong athlete. She's a lawyer. And she has a clip of her dancing in her kitchen. It's at 10 million views now.
Wow.
Like she has a very
Never know.
strong, she has a very strong back. It's a very like, you know, that we all have a body, so which makes bodies fascinating to everyone
Hmm.
because we all have one, you
Right.
know. And so she's like, you know, and she posts loads of stuff of her, you know, doing pull-ups, and she's training flags and stuff. And I think she's 62 or 63. So it's like it's this beautiful example of this very um physically strong, capable, multi-passionate woman who you'll see all this like hard training, and then she'll see like, you know, she's an international lawyer, so she's in Paris doing this law thing and this thing, and then a lot of times she's just in her kitchen having a
Having
groove,
fun.
and that's the place I think where we all want to be. We all want to be at some level sharing that confidence, that vulnerability and ease and growth, to be barefoot dancing in our kitchen, to be barefoot dancing in the garden, and to let someone else see it. It's, you know, it's that's huge.
Mhm. Well,
That's
it's funny you say that because I asked the client, I'm like, what do you like about this video that for me that went viral? And she's like, because you're shaking and the way you move, I'm like, I want to be able to do that. It's like you have no inhibition.
yeah,
It's just like you're just doing it and you're
there's
having fun.
ease.
It's just
Yeah,
ease. It's easy for you. And I'm like, that's funny because it's not. It's something that I had to work towards. It's
yeah,
just something that it's just like, how do I peel back these layers of this
yeah.
mask? And
And
I
I
guess that's
think, yeah,
with,
like, you know,
with
I think a lot of us, you know, we try to be too cool for school. Sometimes it's like, you know, you go to a wedding and you're sat there like, you know, I'm being really cool. And then there's like a mum and her kid on the dance floor having the best time ever.
yeah,
And then you say like, hey, do you want to dance? No, I don't dance. Who's having the best time?
right.
You know, but that's a journey from the chair to the dance floor.
It really is. It really is. And I think that's, yeah, you're right. I think that's what people are looking for though, is being able to be able to take off the veil and be like, I'm just going to show up for who I am today and it's okay. And absolutely. And that's really at the end of the day, that's what we want because we all belong. There's nothing, we're not broken. There's nothing to fix. You are you are loved, you are enough. We're just here to, you know, like have fun and celebrate each day that comes, right? And we forget that because we get caught up
Very
in the
serious.
grind.
Yeah. Well, I think we could talk I mean, we'll have
We
to do
already
like a
talked
part
forever, but
two,
yeah.
a part three. I'll be like, what's the latest in Julie's world? Like, what rabbit holes have you gone down? Like, okay, what's happening in lymph fascia right now? Like, where are
Ah,
you?
Rudy.
And like, we didn't even get to the dolphin stuff.
Oh my God, the neurostim. Yeah, we'll have to do another one.
So we'll have to do
Neurostim.
another because I'm fascinated about that. I don't know about it. I'm
Oh,
fascinated
okay.
by it. So I'm going to
Game
book you in for
changer.
another one. We'll do that one. But where can people find you? Where can people connect and find you? And what have you got going on right now for people?
Well, Instagram, obviously, Fitimize Fitness. I have a YouTube channel, Fitimize. So I've been trying to start posting more longer videos there. I have a podcast with my dad called Connecting with the Toms. THOM is the way you spell my last name. I have a website, fitimize.ca, because I'm Canadian. I'm on TikTok, but it's basically my Instagram reels that I put on TikTok. So
Why not? Yeah.
why not? Why not? So, but it's pretty much like if you want to get a hold of me, Instagram, you can DM me there, or my email is at admin@fitimize.ca. If you want to email me, I'm happy to answer questions. Like I said, it's for me, it's all about connecting. So, you know, if you have a question about your body, I'd be happy to offer some insights as to, you know, like you're saying, where to get started. Because, you know, it's about meeting people at where they're at, right? So it's like, if you want to share, if you think you feel safe with me, that's great. So that's the thing, is at the end of the day, it's like if you're looking at shifting your body and you want to, you know, start healing trauma and you want to release trauma, it's really at the end of the day, who do you feel safe with? So start with that relationship, and the most important relationship is the one with yourself, right? So start connecting with you, go from there.
Love it. Yeah. Thank you so much. Thank you so much. And until the next time,
Yes.
because there will be more.
I appreciate your time. Thank you so much for having this chat with me.
No, pleasure.